In this video, I want to talk about testing the inputs and outputs to our program. In our case, the inputs are an IFC file and an IDS file, and the outputs are getting the appropriate validation results that we expect. So let's get into it. I've put together a very simple IFC model. We have 4 walls. We did this in Bonsai BIM, which is an add-in to Blender. Very simply put together 4 walls. That's not the scope of this tutorial, but the details are that if I select one of these walls, you'll see that all 3 of these here, 1, 2, 3, have quantities, whereas this one here does not. So that's what our check is going to look for. Are these walls on a level, and do the walls have quantity takeoff properties? So that's going to be our baseline simple test for us to validate that our app can check the properties and validate whether they contain information or not. So let's get into the IDS file. I'm just going to switch over here to Kiro. And here we have the IDS file, which is an XML file. Quite simply, we're checking if walls are contained within an IFC building story, and we're checking to see if they have a specific property set. So the wall-based quantities set with height, length, net side area, etc. One check that I did do manually is to use this tool from Building Smart International called IDS-tool, which will audit the validity of our IDS file. So this way, we're at least doing a smoke test to see if our IDS file is valid before we start trying to code and inadvertently maybe introduce a bug because our IDS file isn't valid, etc. So for example, if I run this here, it validates that it's okay. And in fact, if I go back to Bonsai BIM here in Blender, and we go over to the Collaborate tab, and I said load from memory here under IFC tester, I loaded the IDS file, and then I execute it. If we say flag failed entities, it will also highlight them eventually here. And I can select the failed entities. I can also list out why it failed and all those reasons, export to BCF, all that. That's already available in Bonsai BIM. That's not the scope of this tutorial. What we want out of this model is to take this IFC, take this IDS, and in our app, check if our app is able to run a validation using both of those. So let's switch over to our running app here in the background, and let's load an IFC file, which we have in our project. It's those same 4 walls that we just created in Bonsai BIM. We're going to load the IDS file, and we're going to run our validation. And we see here that the validation did succeed. We see the results here, and we can see some details. So this is a very simplified test compared to what we were doing before, but this tells us that our inputs are good and we're getting the outputs that we expect. Even though we used AI coding to do most of the heavy lifting on this app so far, we know that it's working because we've done this basic validation. Now, of course, there's likely going to be bugs if we run this on a full-scale project. I'm fully aware of that. The idea here is to continue building on this basic framework or this basic idea of inputs, check the outputs, and to be able to iterate on it and refine it over time. So I'm going to wrap up this brief video here. If you're interested in learning about Bonsai BIM, drop a comment below. I can show you some more. And in the next videos, we're going to look at containerizing this app, converting it into an API endpoint, which will give us the flexibility of essentially deploying it very quickly anywhere and using it from any other software out there. So stay tuned for the next videos.